Hello, and thank you for clicking on the Literacy Volunteers of Harrison County YouTube channel. We're a nonprofit United Way agency. Currently, we are doing a whole series on the HiSet exam, which is the GED test. And this is handling the HiSet Part 8, writing the essay. This will be the last thing that you will do in the English part. You're going to write an essay in response to a pair of passages and a prompt. And a prompt is just maybe a sentence or an idea that they give you about which you're going to write. You have 45 minutes, and we're going to talk a little bit at the end about how to pace yourself so that you can finish on time. But the kind of writing that you're going to be doing is evidence-based writing. You're going to develop an argument or an explanation, but you have to use evidence and details from the text or texts that they give you. You're going to write a few paragraphs, 3 or 4, that clearly develop a line of thought. Introduce your essay with a thesis statement. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Organize it into paragraphs, each of which develops one idea in support of that thesis. And we've talked about paragraphs, we've talked about the main topic sentence, and then conclude with a summary of your argument. So what we're going to do first is look at the prompt. That will be the first thing that you'll have to do. Unpack. They call it unpacking the prompt. You're going to take it apart in your mind, and you're going to plan how you're going to write your essay. All of this as you're reading the prompt. So what we want to do, we read the prompt and we want to ask ourselves some questions. First, what are we writing about? Is this about oil companies? Is this about diet fads? Is this about vaping? What are we reading about? And then based on that prompt, how many passages will I be given and what will they contain? Sometimes you'll just have one passage. Sometimes you'll have 2 or more that you have to read. What does the prompt ask me to do? It may ask you to take a position, for or against. It may just ask you to discuss. But whatever it is, you have to figure out what it's asking you to do, and then what am I being asked to include in my response? You have to make sure that you're answering the proper question. After we unpack the prompt, we're going to read the passages, because now we know what we're going to be asked. We can read the passages with that idea in mind. We're going to analyze the passages. First, identify the topic. Again, is it dieting? Is it vaping? Is it running? Whatever it is, we have to identify the topic of the passage. Then ask ourselves, is the author neutral about the topic? Or that is she or he merely giving you the history of something? Are they explaining how something works or describing something? That's neutral. You don't really have an idea or a stance that you're taking. You're just describing something. Or does the author have an opinion about the topic? We're for vaping. We think it keeps people from smoking cigarettes. We're against vaping because of the amount of nicotine and the younger kids that have gotten into vaping. So figure out where the author stands on that topic. And the third thing we're going to do, if he or she does not have an opinion, why did they write the passage? Sometimes you wonder, well, why are they even writing this? If they don't have any opinion about it, it would be kind of a boring assignment. But sometimes those are things that we have to do. The next thing we're going to do is to develop a thesis statement. Thesis is different than a topic sentence. We're going to read and analyze the writer's arguments, and now we're going to develop this response. The thesis statement is going to state when you're writing your essay, central claim or a position that you'll be arguing for and supporting with this evidence. Say you did have the passages on vaping, and one was for and one was against. What is your position? Are you for? Are you against? You have to pick, and we're going to put that in our thesis statement. And then you're going to have to pick why you're for or against. And then you're going to have to support that with evidence from the text. So a thesis statement is going to make your main point clear. I am against vaping. That's pretty clear. And then it's also going to provide the reader with a preview of what you will be discussing. I am against vaping because I think it is bad for your health, it is addictive, and too many people do it. Those are your 3 ideas. That's why you're against vaping. A thesis statement differs from an opinion, which is just how I feel about something or a belief about the topic. We have to have evidence. This is evidence-based writing. You can't put I am against vaping because when people are in front of me in traffic, it irritates me when they vape out the window and I can smell it. Those are just opinions. Those aren't facts that are based on the passages that we read. A thesis statement should introduce the topic that will be discussed in your essay. They know from that sentence, I am against vaping, what you're going to be discussing. So now that you know what you're going to be discussing, we have to go to these passages and get evidence that helps our point of view or our idea come across to the reader of our essay. Once you have formulated your thesis, you're going to need evidence, and you're also going to need details from the passage or passages to support your claim. You may even be able to find some details in the one about the people are for vaping that you could use in yours against. You have to be able to use your details correctly. You're going to preview the prompt before you read the passage or passages. And that's going to help us to formulate this thesis statement as we're reading the prompt. And that'll help us to gather that relevant evidence and details that are going to support our thesis. What I recommend that you do if you're taking a pencil and paper, underline or highlight your ideas, or you could take notes on the side because they have scratch paper that you could just throw away. That way you'll know as you're looking at it what details you want to put in your essay. And so we're going to have to use our 45 minutes very wisely. That's not a lot of time to read a prompt, read passages, gather evidence, write our thesis, and write a whole entire essay. So we're going to plan to use about 10 minutes for our pre-writing for this phase or our planning phase of what we're going to write. Maybe 5 minutes if you're pretty fast at it. Here's our strategy. We've got to develop the strategy, and it's going to help us to use our allotted time. So there's a chart here of our essay writing strategy. We've put the amount of times we want to spend on these things here. Our planning, 5 to 10 minutes. Preview it, read the passages and make notes of your details, and then you can use your scratch paper to jot down a thesis statement and plan our response. We can use an outline that's kind of outdated, an idea map, something that will help you to remember what you're going to write about. Then as we're drafting our essay, we want to spend about 25 to 30 minutes doing that. We're going to write our thesis statement. And then as we're looking at our plan that we wrote up in the pre-planning stage, we can pull out that specific evidences and those quotes from our text. We want to, and then we kind of think, do we have any other relevant information that we know about vaping? I had a friend who vaped and got cancer of the mouth, or something that you could put in there that's relevant. Not just strange facts or strange opinions, but something that's relevant to what you're writing. And then you want to write a closing. And this closing is going to summarize your position. And it also has to restate your thesis, but in a different way. You don't take the exact same thesis from your introduction and put it in your conclusion. You kind of revamp it and restate it. And then the last 10 minutes, right before you're getting ready to turn it in, this is the time to revise anything that's wrong with it. Let's reread it and our thesis, and we're going to review our response. We need to make sure that we've stayed focused on that prompt and we didn't just go off on a tangent and write about something else. And then we have to check for grammatical errors and fix those, and make sure our essay flows and makes sense to the reader. Read it all together. Don't read it in paragraphs. Read it all as one continuous essay. Does this make sense? Does this flow? Is this something that if I read that would be informative to me? So here's our 30 minutes in drafting our response, and we've talked about this again. Our thesis, the body of our response, our relevant info. Make sure that you're consistently focusing on your thesis statement, going back and looking at it, refocusing, making sure you're answering the things you said you were going to answer, and then write your conclusion. Our introduction lays out our argument and how we're going to support it. I recommend that you put 3 ideas in your thesis statement and make a paragraph for each idea. Those are our body paragraphs, the meat of our essay. We're going to elaborate. There's where we use our evidence, details, facts, and personal experience. And then your conclusion. We're going to restate that thesis and reinforce it. When I was in school, they said you're going to tell people what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them again, tell them again, tell them again, and summarize what you just told them. So you have to remember that you're to stay focused on what you're doing. And then we're going to revise and edit. These are some things we want to ask ourselves as we're reading to do our revision. Does the introductory paragraph contain the thesis statement and lay out the main point of my response? If it doesn't, rewrite it. Does each paragraph have only one main idea? Start with a topic sentence, and do these paragraphs support my thesis statement? Number 3. If there are specific and relevant supporting evidence from the text for each main idea, each of those 3 paragraphs, do I have supporting evidence for all of them? Don't just put it in one of them. It has to be in all of your paragraphs. Have I assessed the validity of the arguments in the passages? Remember, we've talked about validity before. Is there a clear flow of ideas from one paragraph to the next? And do I use those transitional words, phrases, and ideas? If you don't remember what they are, you can go back onto this HiSet and look. I've done lessons on all of these things. Are there any irrelevant ideas or sentences that we could just mark out? You might want to look for those. Or can we combine them together? Are there any, remember we talked about we don't want short, choppy sentences, and we can combine those into compound sentences, which makes you sound like a better writer. Can I improve my word choice or be more specific or interesting? And is there a concluding paragraph that restates and reinforces the thesis? You have to make sure you have all of this because you have to score a 2 or above on this essay in order to pass your HiSet test. The very last thing before you turn it in, edit. We're going to check our grammar, our usage, and our mechanics. And I have videos on all of these things that you can go back and look at if you're questioning what are they. The last 5 minutes we're rereading it and asking ourselves, are all of my sentences complete? You don't want any run-ons, you don't want any fragments. Are all of your sentences complete? No run-ons, no comma splices, no fragments that I need to correct. Parallel structure, we talked about that. Subject and verb agreement. Are nouns and pronouns used correctly? Are verb forms and tenses used correctly? We don't say I is, we was. We don't say that. You got to go back and check these. Does the subject of each sentence match the verb? Is the punctuation correct? If it's a sentence, are you putting a question mark? Are your commas in the right place? Semicolons. Is the capitalization used correctly? Are all the words correctly spelled? The worst thing you probably want to do is start spelling words incorrectly. That's going to make you sound less valid, right? And are there any inappropriate word choices? Not inappropriate words, like words you think you shouldn't be using, but does this word sound weird when I use it in this context? Am I using it properly? If you do all of this, you should be able to get a high score on your essay, and then you will only have to take that part once. We would like to thank you for looking at all 8 of our Handling the HiSet videos. If you have any questions, you can put them below, or if you could like to go back and kind of look at all of these before you take the exam, that is probably a good idea.